Hi folks, Tom Coy with yet another episode of Arbor Shield. And today's title, I don't think I've ever said a title before, have I? Well, anyhow, today's title, Outreach, Recidivism, and Addiction. We've got some really cool guests, and I'm looking forward to talking to them, learning a lot. I'm sure you are too. So let's get to it. We will start with the boss of the Director of Community Engagement for the Washtenaw County Sheriff's Department, Derrick Jackson. Thank you, sir, for being with us.
Thank you for having us.
Sara McNeely, who is an outreach worker and also a RAP representative, which you can explain later on, Sara, but you have to hand it to me. I got that one right. She's been on the show before, if you recognize her. Very good. And last but not least is Clyde Vandekar, right? Did I get that right?
Yep.
Clyde, all right. Another outreach worker for the Sheriff's Department, and also a good Dutch name. All right, so let's delve into it. Maybe, Derrick, you could lead us off and give us a little synopsis, if you will, with when we talk about this outreach program that the Sheriff's Department has, you know, just kind of give us a thumbnail sketch, if you will.
So yeah, I'll try to be as brief as possible, but back in 2009, one of the things we started to look at was our recidivism rate in Washtenaw County and how high it was, and the idea or the notion of like building strong and sustainable communities. And if we really wanted to do that and tackle that recidivism rate, how could we do that without actually being connected to the folks who, quite honestly, are probably in and out of the system a lot? Mm-hmm. And so that was a really big piece of why we wanted to design and implement a street outreach team. We wanted to work with those individuals that historically aren't the people that we normally work with when it comes to law enforcement. Okay. And so that's really where it began.
Okay. And I don't want to focus on all in the boss. Yeah. I want to get to the boots on the ground too. But for the most part, tell me how someone comes to be a part of the program. How does...
All different ways. I mean, sometimes it's someone we meet in jail, sometimes it's someone we meet in the community. It could be maybe an officer like yourself who meets someone on the street who says, I've known this person for a long time, and they just seem like they're in the right place, it's the right time, and they're really interested in giving back. And ultimately, what I always say to outreach workers is they're the experts on their life and that lifestyle that they've lived, okay. And we take that expertise and use it for positive.
Okay. So, and just staying with that. So let's say I'm an officer or a deputy, I come to you or I contact the number that we're going to leave up on the screen later, and I say, Ms. Jones here, I think would be a good candidate. What's the next step? She says, you know, she talks to an intake worker of some sort, I assume.
So I think it depends on what they want. So if they want to actually become an outreach worker, so do what these guys do, okay. Then there's a long process to prove yourself, to volunteer with us. We get to know you very well, see what your skill set is, and then ultimately you use that skill set and that expertise to help other people in the community. Okay. If they're looking for, or if they need help, our outreach workers are really good at establishing relationships and then connecting to resources. They're not case managers, they're really connectors. Okay. And so we're all over the community working with people who are really struggling and just helping them navigate different systems and get connected to maybe the resources they need.
Gotcha. Okay. Remind me to come back and ask a follow-up question, but I don't want to leave these guys just hanging here. Sara, you've been on the show before, but for folks that haven't seen it, could you give us a snapshot of your own story, but maybe follow up with how you got plugged or involved in this particular program and what your role is now, including the RAP representative, which has no meaning to me personally, but we're going to find out. Okay.
Well, I grew up in a really small town. I was a straight A student and an only child. And I was sexually assaulted when I was 16, and I didn't want to live in my city anymore. And I just started hanging out with kids in different cities. And I used alcohol and marijuana to kind of escape that reality a little bit. And it just progressed to me hanging out with people that were doing more and more harder drugs, I guess you could say. And I went from alcohol and weed to party drugs, and then Eventually, I was working full-time and going to school full-time, and I felt like I was running out of steam. So I started using cocaine and Adderall and heroin to kind of get me through the day. And eventually I lost my job, which I was using drugs to try to make it through. I failed out of school, which I was using drugs to get me through. I was living out of my car during the polar vortex, which was awful.
Wow.
And so I was homeless and just using drugs and running around and trying to support my habit. And I was arrested when my parents finally put a missing persons report on me and kind of figured out what was going on. They were pretty oblivious to the whole idea at first, and then they kind of put two and two together because, I mean, I couldn't hide it anymore. And so they put a missing persons report out on me. I was picked up and arrested, spent a little bit in jail, and then I eventually was able to get into rehab, and then came out to Ann Arbor, did transitional, kind of trying to get my life back in order. And I ran into this girl who we had some mutual friends, and she worked for the sheriff's office at that time. And I'm a criminal justice major, and I learned all about like the current things that they're teaching in schools, which is punishment. And personally, I have to believe in second chances, because what would be the point? Like, I wouldn't believe that I could be changed. So I thought the outreach team was a good kind of outlet for that. You know, what I've been learning in school, I'm interested in criminal justice, but also being able to help people.
Gotcha. Okay. Outstanding. Thanks, sir. And Clyde.
So I was a pretty normal kid. You know, as far as family life, I think that I had as many advantages and, you know, as many comforts as an average person would growing up. And I think that my experimentation with drug use was pretty normal as well. You know, I started with what I would consider lighter things, pot, recreational drugs. Alcohol came a little bit after that. I think when things really changed, I had gotten into a car accident when I was about 20. I got exposed to, you know, more hardcore drugs, like the prescription opiates that, you know, you get for surgeries. So I was on opiate like pain management for a few months following 2 surgeries from that car accident. After that, I think that something had changed with me. I started to maintain a state of wanting to be high all the time. You know, it wasn't just about recreation at that point, you know. So I got back into college, you know, a little bit later on, I think 24, 25. And at that time, when I'd started college at EMU, that was when I got exposed to the more harder drugs, heroin, cocaine. And it was because, you know, people that I was hanging out with were doing them. It was a combination of factors, you know. Not being happy with what I was doing in school and not being, you know, happy with any relationships, getting more increasingly isolated because of the drug use. It was just a vicious cycle. So that continued on for a few years. It just got worse. You know, eventually I was not employable. I had estranged myself from, you know, closest family members. They didn't want any part of that, you know. And it just, the deeper I got into it, the worse it got, to the point where I was not able to work. I had to drop out of school. And I got to the point where I was starting to do really sketchy stuff just to get money to maintain the habit. You know, I was doing heroin every day, cocaine every day, and So that was when I first got entangled with the legal system. I think it was just a really slow process of things, getting into place for me to be in recovery. There were a lot of things at first that were blocking me from that. I wasn't interested in any kind of like personal development or personal growth. I was in a relationship at the time too that was not healthy. All those things served to block me from recovery at first. So that was a process that was filled with a lot of relapses, a lot of stumbles, and another, I had at first been incarcerated. I got involved with some like check fraud things that I was doing. That was after the point where I was unable to work, not able to get hired anywhere. It's just, so I had to do a little bit of time in jail for that. That was when I got exposed to recovery culture the first time. But like I said, there were things that were blocking me from that. Personally, I was stubborn. I didn't feel like I could benefit from, inpatient treatment, so I turned that down. I was, just uneducated about how to access recovery. So, the last relapse that I had, that was the worst one, and that was just about 2 years ago. Okay. So the way that all came to a head was I was out there using, my family had pretty much written me off. I was out of my apartment, living in my van for a while. Then I got rid of that, and I was just straight up homeless. I had lost all hope, That was the situation. It was hopeless, especially because I had made some attempts before and that it had not gone well, and that just added to the sense of hopelessness. It came to a head, I had a situation where somebody that was a stranger to me had overdosed on heroin, and I was there, in that situation. I had to make a decision. I found out that I'm not the kind of person who would walk away from someone who was dying from an overdose. And at that point, I was wanted. I was running from warrants. I knew I was going to jail. With that phone call to the authorities. I was just tired at that point. Yeah. So, as far as when I got involved with outreach, I met. My supervisor, Marv, actually is a facilitator for a class in the jail.
Oh, okay.
And I was court-ordered to take that class, Thinking Matters. And, at that point in time, he had said, I've got a job for you when you get out of treatment, contact me. It turned out that I had a mutual friend, or I had someone that had a mutual friend that was working there already. It's the same person that Sara mentioned.
Oh, okay.
I went up and talked to Marv, and that was it. I started the process. So
Congratulations. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, if I could just say too, I think
Sure.
when you listen to hear them talk, they have amazing stories, and I think this is the piece of the program that is always so insightful for us, is that folks with that lifestyle and expertise, how well that works together with law enforcement, right? The folks that we see every
Sure.
day out on the
Sure.
street who are dealing with substance abuse.
Absolutely.
So that's really, in a nutshell, how they describe their life stories is really why we think it's important.
Yeah. And now the program's been around for how long?
Since 2009.
Okay. And when you started the program, I'm sure I guess, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't ask this question here. I'm sure, like everything else that's implemented, there are mistakes that are made,
Yeah.
and you refine it, and it's just a process as you roll along.
Yeah.
So what mistakes, if you will, if any, you made initially with the program, and it seems to be very successful now, with regard to where you are now? Maybe, something you didn't know about recovering addiction. Yeah. I don't know. But.
So when we originally started the program, it was all about recidivism, taking folks who may have committed crimes before, breaking down barriers, allowing them to be employed, and kind of training up and building themselves up so they would never victimize another person again, right? When we first started, we wouldn't hire anyone with substance abuse history.
Okay.
That was just something that we didn't know enough about. We kind of shied away from. And then over time, though, what we really started to find out was most of the people who were really good at this job or who had really struggled had some overlap with substance abuse history. So as we got a little more comfortable, we did start to hire. We hired one individual, and then from there, the sky has really been the limit in connecting with folks out on the streets.
Somebody, I think it was, we were having a conversation, that is the three of us, you, me, and Ashton, a while back, and I forget who made the remark, but that it was kind of tragic. You know, you have all these different boards with regard to addiction across the country and all these, sorry, but talking heads, you know, that know the answer to everything, but there's there's nobody in recovery sitting on these, you know, I mean, it's, you know, on a much smaller scale, you know, it's kind of like, you know, we want to reform this police department, but I've never done any police, you know what I mean? I mean, you can't do something if you haven't walked the walk. Question for both of you. If you had not had interaction with law enforcement, and I don't mean necessarily this program, but let's just talk about law enforcement, period. If law enforcement had not, quote unquote, caught up with you or whatever the circumstances were, and you got involved in the criminal justice system, what do you think, you know, would have happened had that not, I don't want to say intercession happened because it's a little different, but yeah, if you haven't been arrested by the police for whatever reason it was.
I can say for myself that a few years ago, addiction and recovery was something that I had no idea about. I didn't know where to get help, and it was still really stigmatized, so you didn't tell people that you had a problem with drugs.
Okay.
So I feel like if I wouldn't have had, you know, an intervention with the cops or law enforcement, that I don't know if I would have ever found this kind of lifestyle. I didn't know how to stop either. I needed that break. I needed to be in someone else's care to have a break from being able to use.
Okay.
That's my personal take on it. I know other people have recovered in other ways not involving law enforcement, but it's so common that I don't think that you could say that it doesn't have an effect on other people's sobriety.
So it's not uncommon.
Yeah.
Okay. What would you say? And you don't have to give me, this is not looking for a politically correct answer by a cop, all right? So it has nothing to do with it.
Honestly, I would be dead for sure. If I hadn't been, at the time when that had happened, I was on a spiral. You know, I was suicidal. I didn't have any interest in life, you know, or getting better. I didn't have any hope that that could happen. So, you know, it was almost like against my will, right, that I was given this opportunity to recover. But if the law enforcement hadn't been involved in that, I would have just kept going until I had died. And that I can say honestly.
Okay.
So
and do you think, and you mentioned it too, the hopeless component, right? And the minute you said that, for some reason I was remembering a book that I was reading that back in the concentration camps, that those who gave up hope died. You know, just as a result of that, just no hope, and they died. So the hopelessness, right, reaches a point where, I mean, how would you fill in that sentence? The hopelessness reaches a point where, what, for you personally? The hopelessness of, you know, the lifestyle surrounding the addiction, and I mean, I can only appreciate from the outside looking in, so to speak. So I would imagine a lot of your day is consumed, right, looking for the fix or whatever that is, right, so that you can operate at a normal level, or you still
function. Yeah.
Okay, so the hopelessness sets in, and then your thoughts are what? I mean, other than the
Really opposing. I was invincible, so I didn't ever think that I would be caught or that I would die, but I had the reservation that I probably would. I mean, and I didn't care as much. I was just using to function, to be normal, to not feel pain anymore. So I didn't think it was going to happen on one hand, but I also didn't care if it did.
Okay. Back to the hopeless. Yeah, that makes sense.
It's this is something that I've spent a lot of time kind of thinking about, you know, for myself, trying to sort out, you know, what my thought process actually was around that time. It's pretty hard to sort it out still, you know, because your whole reasoning and logic and everything is so impaired by the drug, you know.
Okay.
So there's that effect on your brain, you know, your logical faculties are impaired. So you go back and forth between, you know, being motivated to, you know, go out there and get more of it, and then losing all motivation for anything else, you know.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I see what you're saying, as much as I can. And Derrick, back to you. I mean, 2009, so we've been at this a while, right? And you're obviously having great success. As you look at those who, I mean, what do you call it? Do you call it, I mean, if somebody goes in, if somebody is being successfully treated for the addiction, is there a graduation date? Because I sit in on, a couple different courts, and there is a graduation date for those participating. So is there a graduation date where they perhaps move into employment or something like that, or is it more?
Yeah, I guess let me just take a second and describe it. So for our outreach team, for those who have experiences or been incarcerated or are in recovery, so after they're hired by, they're employees, so they actually work, these are employees of the sheriff's office. And the way we describe it is, and I think what makes it unique is, by doing good, they get some good for themselves personally. And I think Clyde described it a few minutes ago when he just said, I think about it now for my own personal growth. And so I think that's a part of what the program is.
Okay.
They do a lot of great stuff in the community, and by doing great, they're getting some stuff for themselves.
Okay.
So we're not a treatment program by any stretch of the imagination. We actually, they're employees of the sheriff's office, but their expertise is that lifestyle that they've lived. So they can establish a connection to people who may have lived that lifestyle. Right now, if one of our deputies brings someone back using naloxone and someone's overdosing there in the hospital, one of these two may be sent out to the hospital just to start that conversation and maybe see if that person's ready for recovery. So they work for us. I think in the work that they do, though, they get some stuff out of it personally to kind of keep them on that road to recovery.
Okay. And so when you guys interact with these folks, whatever the setting may be, and let's say, just for the sake of discussion, you get a lot of hostility, anger, denial. What do you personally, why do you smile? Sara's smiling. So what do you do? Okay, so I mean, I can't believe everybody you approach says, yes, I'm definitely ready for sobriety. I'm sure that doesn't happen. So for the one that responds that way, what do you usually, I mean, do you have a canned response, or is it case by case basis?
I mean, I can't force anybody to do what they don't want to do. So I try to relate, give my personal story, what it was like for me and what it's like now. And if they're not ready, then just give them my contact information, and when you are, please call me.
Okay, and let's say they're resistant initially, well, like what percentage of the time would they call you a week, month, year later?
I've ran into a few people, but it's not very often that, if they're resistant, they kind of give up on that idea until you've had another interaction with them again, and it sends off a light bulb. Oh yeah, I've met you before, I've heard your story, we already have a relationship, kind of, I'm ready for help now.
Okay. So would you agree with this statement, I'm learning as I go along here, that it's more of a cumulative effect of consequences to the addict than really a sudden epiphany in the middle of nowhere, but rather, it sounds to me like you're kind of painted into a corner. You paint yourself into a corner, I should say.
I can talk about my experience, and that's what it was like for me. It was a slow process of bumping my head a lot and learning, and it wasn't very smooth. It does vary so much from person to person. Some people do have that, light bulb moment where they just realize, and the way is clear. That wasn't my experience, but it does vary a lot from person to person. Okay. I'd agree with what Sara said. We operate under the assumption that every interaction that you have with someone plants that seed. And hopefully, at a certain point, things will start to make sense to that person. They'll know where to go and how to get help. So.
Okay. We got about 5 minutes left, so back to you, Derrick. Now, this is a loaded question, Derrick.
Okay.
Loaded question. How did police officers respond to the program upon its inception versus where they are now? And again, I honestly don't interact too much with the sheriff's department because I'm inside most of the time, so it's not a canned response, but I'm curious.
Yeah, I always like to say, I think that the one misconception I think around officers that the general public has is like, you know, they wouldn't be interested in some of this, or as a social worker, law enforcement and social worker are far apart. And what I found is just the opposite. If you have something that works, I think officers are out there running into people all the time. If they have a tool that's going to work, and they know it's going to work, they'll use it. So I think there's probably some skepticism, you know, what could Clyde or Sara or someone like them bring to the table? But I think as people, as deputies start working with them, if a deputy can call Sara and say, hey, I just ran into this young lady, I've seen her a couple different times, she's really struggling with addiction, can you reach out to her? What we've seen over time now, over these years, that's starting to happen more and more and more.
Very cool.
And you'll see in other agencies too that peer support, not just in law enforcement, it's just one of those things that a lot of different organizations around our community are starting to use.
Okay. Well, I think it's outstanding from what I know of the department and talking to everybody that's in the program itself. So maybe Ann Arbor, we can start thinking about it. But anyhow, I'm almost retired. What do I have to say? Okay, Clyde, I did prep you ahead of time for this final thing, man. So someone is watching the show, maybe in the throes of addiction, wanting sobriety or not, or maybe a loved one is watching the show. And something they've heard kind of has caught their ear. What would be their one piece of advice above everybody else? I mean, they've done what they can do for this loved one, but it's not working. You know, you can't, like you said earlier, you can't make somebody else sober. But what would be your one piece of advice for them?
To a loved one?
Yeah.
Or to some...
Well, let's start with loved one, and then give me your best piece of advice for somebody that maybe is on the fence with regard to sobriety.
Okay. I'll do my best.
I know you'll do it well.
So, first of all, I would want to stress that resources are definitely out there for help for that. There's support groups for people that are affected by people with addiction. You know, those things are out there. And for the person that is struggling with addiction, above all, you know, we do recover. People out there. It is possible. It happens. It's not, I don't think that people are, you know, loud enough about it and you know, open enough about it. That's starting to change a little bit. But, you know, a lot of what you see and hear is the, you know, worst case scenarios. And then people recover and they kind of quietly go back to their lives and you don't hear about them anymore. So, but it does happen.
I like that comment, you know, you don't hear about it enough, which makes sense. If there's already a stigmatism with it, you wouldn't go around bragging, hey, you know, I'm off heroin or I'm no longer an alcoholic. Yeah, so that makes a lot. I see some similarities here with the mental health system and the stigma isn't there. But anyhow, I want to thank each and every one of you for being on the show today. I really appreciate you being here, taking the time. And is there we got about 1 minute, anything either one of you want to say with regard to police work? No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding, man. I'm kidding. No, anything you want to share with the audience or anybody before we take off? We got, no?
No, well, we have a couple of things coming up in the next couple of months where we're going to talk a lot more about this program and other programs. So if people are really interested in learning about this kind of work or they want to become an outreach worker, I know you're going to put the number up, but we definitely ask people to, if you can talk to folks, have a life experience, and you want to help people navigate into a good lifestyle, definitely reach out to us. We're always looking for good people.
Cool. And we'll put that up on the screen for you. And again, that's Washington County Sheriff's Department Outreach Program. And the phone number there, someone will get back to you. Thanks again for joining us. Stick around for the second half of the show. We'll have some new guests for us. Thank you.
Riding a bike in this pleasant afternoon surely invigorates you. But wait, you've just missed something.
Michigan Motor Vehicle Code considers bicycles to be vehicles while using the roadway. This means cyclists are required to stop at all stop signs and red lights and obey the other traffic laws, just as motor vehicles.
Okay, back for part 2 of our show today. And we've escorted our other guests off, and 2 new guests on, which are joining us now. And they too work under the outreach program for the Washington County Sheriff's Department. To my left, and I want to make sure I get your last name right, Willie. So here we go. Willie Sturdivant.
Junior.
Junior. See, I knew I was going to mess that up, man. All right, sorry. And Marv Gundy, who is the coordinator for the outreach program. I appreciate really both of you. I mean, Marv, you and I have met previously, but I appreciate very much both of you being here and sharing your stories, and hopefully we can get the word out, like you said, and bridge some gaps and make some good things happen, because it certainly is a prevalent issue in the community. If you wouldn't mind, you can just share your stories, if you would, and then conclude with how that involved the Sheriff's Department. Willie, if you want to go first, that's cool.
Okay, I grew up in the Willow Run community with great parents, great sisters and brothers. In the neighborhood, it's a lot of poverty, low income families, and a lot of drug activities, and alcoholics, and a lot of things like that. My story is that when I was coming up, after high school, I started working, had kids and things, and then started getting a lot of anger because things wasn't going my way. And long story short, I had got a drunk driving, and then I got a second drunk driving. I got my third drunk driving in 2002. That's when I had hit rock bottom. And I felt like it was time for a change in my life. So I went back to school in Washington. I got my socials degree. I went back to Eastern, and I got my bachelor's degree in social work. At that time of graduating, I ran into Marv, and he said he had a job for me up at the county.
Okay.
So I went and applied at the county. I became an outreach worker. Working for 2 or 3 months, I got a sort of a promotion. I became a peer-to-peer run group. So I help felonies, that's guys that's in jail with felonies or not in does not have felonies, that's coming out.
Okay.
Try to help them get jobs, housing, and stuff like that, and try to keep them on the right track so they can be productive citizens in society.
Gotcha.
So I go into the jail and I do intakes with them, see what they need, and try to get them to come to our program once they get out, and try to find them work and housing.
Okay. So I have to ask, and we're going to get to Marv, because he's very anxious to make some statements. So you're on this trajectory, if you will, with 3 drunk driving. You're carrying a lot of anger and rage for whatever reason, and then something. I mean, you made a right turn, and it sounds to me like it was pretty, sudden, if you will. So what was it? Was it someone? Was it something? Was it a cumulative effect?
My wife had a lot to do with it.
Okay.
I ran into my wife in 2003, and I was kind of feeling down about myself and feeling like, didn't nobody want to hire me because of, the felony I had on my record. And she was like, you need to go back to school, and you can do this and you can do that.
Wow.
So that motivated me to, feel more good about myself and, apply myself a little bit more.
Okay.
And I ended up graduating with at both schools with honors.
Wow.
So
Congratulations, man. Very cool. Okay. Marv?
Marv Gundy. I'm not native to Michigan. I'm from the East Coast. The program. So I was an outreach worker prior to becoming the coordinator
Okay.
of the program. And I was just like everybody else who came through as an outreach worker. I was going to Eastern Michigan University, and I was working at Parkridge Community Center in the south side of Ypsilanti, and someone had came through and was soliciting that the sheriff was hiring people with criminal backgrounds, and I thought it was a joke. So I had
you don't hear that every day.
I had to go along with it. So I said, well, you know what? I have some of those things you're looking for, those qualities. So long story short, I went through with it, and the sheriff was actually hiring people with criminal backgrounds to kind of be that buffer in between and to show that they have a stake in actually helping people as well. I thought that was a big part of the program. And actually giving me an opportunity to give back, which I was doing in the community already. So yeah, I got into the program that way, and I I matriculated out because I kind of graduated college and I was getting higher levels in life. I worked for EMU for a couple of years and then I was brought back on to run the program. I think it just kind of worked out, right place, right time, and I had actually been through the program.
Okay.
So I was brought back on to run the program. What gets me the skill set to be able to, work in this type of program is I've had 25, 26 years of life before I moved to Michigan. Right before I moved to Michigan, I had just got out of prison. I had did 2 years in prison in New Jersey and some time in New York. And that was the time when I realized some things about my makeup and how I was brought up that caused me to be in this recidivating cycle of getting in trouble. And that was when I kind of took a look at myself and came up with some ideas behind how I could help myself. And then moving to Michigan, I put those ideas into play.
Okay.
And they worked for me. I ended up becoming the coordinator of a great program that is built on helping people out.
So it sounds like for you, prison gave you that kind of time out where, I mean, you're kind of forced, right, to think more than you normally would, right? I would assume. Okay. So in a very roundabout way, it's not recommended, but prison allowed you that time to...
Well, I think prison allows you to take a look at yourself, and then you can, and I'm very frank about some people are just going to be evil and some people aren't. Some people are circumstantial of why they're in trouble, and some people just chase trouble.
Agreed.
I think when you get in some situations like prison, you find out which one of those people you are.
Okay.
And for majority of people, they know they're not that person. So majority of people can come home and remember, I had 2 parents. Life wasn't that hard, you know what I mean? So you start to rebuild, the pieces, and you don't make excuses for yourself. That's where I was at in my experience in prison. But other people have different times. Some people don't get that lucky to come through prison without, some ailments, post-traumatic, stresses and things.
I notice you guys are, I say you guys, the group, is pretty respectful out of saying, hey, this is my story. I'm not speaking for this person or this organization, but I can only speak for me and my experiences. I respect that. Okay, we're going to look at a film clip that Marv pulled, and then we're going to chat about that along with some other stuff. So we can cut to the clip a minute.
Mr. Clark, I wanted to talk to you about those kids you threw out yesterday.
What about them?
Well, I was one of them, but you made some kind of mistake.
Mistake?
Yes, sir.
What's your name, son?
Sams, Thomas Sams.
Thomas Sams. You're a freshman?
Yes, sir.
Cutting class and smoking crack, Mr. Sams? There's no mistake.
No, sir. It wasn't me, sir. I swear it wasn't.
It wasn't you, huh?
No.
You think I'm stupid, son?
No, sir.
Yes, you do. You're trying to con a con man. You're not even learning anything on the streets, are you? You come with me.
What are you doing? What's up here?
Now, let me tell you something. The trouble with being a teenager is you don't know nothing. The problem with teenagers is you think you're smarter than people who've already been down the road you're traveling. You know what I'm trying to say to you, boy? Do you?
Yes, sir.
Did you tell your father I threw you out of school? Look at me, damn it!
No, sir.
Why not? No guts, huh? Afraid of what he's gonna say to you, aren't you?
My father doesn't live with us anymore, sir.
Oh, is that what you're doing now? Go around feeling sorry for yourself, boy? Huh? Go on, get out of here. You're wasting my time.
Please let me back, sir. I have to get back in school. I can't go home and tell my mom I got kicked out of school.
Now, why should I let you back into my school, Sams?
Because I'm going to do better, sir.
How?
By doing my work.
What else?
and staying out of trouble.
What have you been thinking about all this time? Why should I believe you now?
Because I changed my ways.
I don't believe you, Sams. I don't think you've changed a thing. Go on, jump.
No, I don't want to jump.
Yes, you do. You smoke crack, don't you? You smoke crack, don't you? Look at me, boy. Don't you smoke crack?
Yes, sir.
You know what that does to you? Huh?
No, sir.
It kills your brain cells, son. It kills your brain cells. Now, when you're destroying your brain cells, you're doing the same thing as killing yourself. You're just doing it slower. Now, I say if you want to kill yourself, don't fuck around with it. Go in and do it expeditiously. Now, go in and jump. Jump!
No, I don't want to kill myself, sir.
You're quite sure about this, are you?
Yes, sir.
All right, Sams, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to go back on my own word just this once and let you back into my school. Because you're still a baby and you don't know shit. But you understand this, boy. You're not going to get a moment's rest. I'm going to be on your case every minute. You mess up just once, and you're out of here. Now, you understand me? Do you understand me?
Yes, sir.
I'm going back downstairs.
All right. Again, Marv picked out the film, so don't call me with a bunch of hate mail and everything else. Right? All right. So a lot of things. I'm jotting down questions and comments and so forth. First off, it really seems, at one point, even as a hardened cop, I think I would have gone with it. You know what I mean? Like, you know, the thing where he says his dad died. So I'm like, you know, I would have fallen into that. Well, you know what I mean? I kind of feel sorry for him, whatever. So anyhow, why do you use that particular, or why does that clip resonate with you? Why is that?
Well, first thing that resonates in the clip is after the whole intensity of the clip, if you've seen at the end, the principal, the guy was a principal, he sighed.
Yeah.
And in that sigh is, you know, having to take that type of angle towards a situation like that. Like, there's so many angles you can take, but taking the hard angle and the truthful, being frank with an individual angle that they're ruining their lives and this is wrong, isn't always taking the best. So, you know, by him, I felt like for him coming straight at the kid and being honest with the kid on how he felt, it takes away from him. So it's easier to lie than to be honest. So when you're put in a position like he was to be a leader, I think that the clip showed that he chose to be a leader by making people take ownership of the issues and not blame everybody else for what goes on.
Okay.
And like you commented on when he spoke about his father, I just felt like those are realities that he has to face. So to me, they're irrelevant in his development as far as helping him get there. If it's not going to help you get to where you're going to get, then we shouldn't dwell on it, you know. The clip reminds me of my saying, my dad told me, you know, don't cry over the spilt milk. You clean it up and pour yourself another glass. So that's kind of
Gotcha.
how I see, you know, the clip.
Okay. All right. So, Willie, I assume you've seen this clip before.
I've seen it before.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
But I didn't know Marv was going to use it, but I can relate to that. I look at it like, you know, a kid needing a second chance. You know, a lot of times people get in, and ain't got to be that predicament what he's in right now, but just in the community. A lot of young kids is giving up on themselves. They feel like their parents not gave up on them, the teachers not gave up on them. And then some of the kids is looking for attention, a second chance, somebody to show they care, you know, and then they might show a little bit more effort to do better. And I see when kids see that adults care about them, they tend to do more to show that adult that they're going to try to do positive things. And in that clip, it's at the end that, you know, he completed school and everything, you know, from coming from using drugs and being with the worth kids, and he telling him to jump, you want to kill yourself, and he's saying, no, I want to do better.
Right.
And then by Joe Clark giving him a second chance, he went through school, he started doing better, he stopped hanging with the wrong crowd, and then he ended up graduating high school.
Okay. So if we take we stick with this story, if you will, and we applied a relatively common method of helping this young man, it would have been to get him, forget the speech, forget all the hardcore stuff. So let's say he got expelled. Now we get him back in. We're gonna give him special programs, maybe his own tutor, if you will. We're going to, every time he fails to do an assignment, we're going to say it's okay. We're going to do the assignment. You see what I'm saying? We're going to surround him with that kind of.
Will we use?
Right. So that's relatively common from my experience looking in on a number of things. So what would your comment be to that versus, maybe not spot on, but you said the confrontation was important. The reality check, if you will, what I would call, is important versus the blanket and the warm milk. And
the reality check's more important because the blanket and warm milk can't last forever. But the reality is going to last forever. If I have to learn how to live without my dad, then I have to learn how to live without my dad. The supplements that you're giving me that's helping me forget that fact right now, like a big brother, a big sister, that all fades, and eventually I'm by myself, and I still have to know that I had the void of not having a father. So you have to live with the realities and be comfortable with your realities. I mean, you're not alone. There's a lot of people like that. But going back to, like, how would I utilize that? Like there's other things in that young man's life that is causing him, I feel, to not do good in his situation. And, speaking about him smoking crack, that's an addictive habit. So it's not like he's going to come to school on Monday and the crack habit is going to be gone. There's other factors that would have to go behind the scene in order to address some of these things. The people at his house might not be educated. So how does he attain the education with just the school system there? So, we have this effect, like we're going to say, we're going to help you, you need to stop this. But once the young man says stop, what's in place to help him achieve those hard-fought goals like shelter, food every night, attainment, and then those are the things that you were leading to, we would have to do in order for him to be successful.
Gotcha. Okay. All right, so we'll change. I mean, this is what happens usually. I have all these beautiful questions all made up, but I can see we're not going to get to them because we're going to stick with this film clip and we're going to expand. But such is life. So Willie, a question for you. So we don't know anything about Sims's his family life, but we can kind of imagine. What your Sims, let's say you're in a house that, he's just bombarded with all these negative messages or reinforcing, you poor kid, your dad split when you were 10, or, your mom has to work 3 jobs, What you have to have somebody positive. For you, it was your wife, but what's your advice, or how do you deal with that? I mean, do you look for somebody? I mean, for me, it was, an older brother, but do you look for somebody then that's a positive role model, has a positive message versus just being reinforced with, nothing's going to work out, life is against you kind of thing?
Just going back a little bit, I always was raised with a positive atmosphere through my father and my mother. I think a lot of mistakes I made was drifting off in the neighborhood, becoming a follower, doing things that I usually wouldn't do, but the environment that I was in, all the kids was doing it. Gotcha. So you would tend to just drift off into that atmosphere too. And then when you kind of hit rock bottom, and then education has a lot to do with it too. Because when I graduated high school, I graduated, but when I went back to college, they said I had an 8th grade education. Okay. So therefore, I'm 4 grades behind already, thinking I'm not graduated. So it's like a lot of kids, don't know the resources out there to help them get into a different environment, to be in a productive environment around different kids, to seeing that they're doing different things. Because if you brought up in one type of neighborhood, that's all you know. Right. Once you venture off and start being around different kids and seeing different things, you see it's a lot more out there in the world than just what's in your neighborhood.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So I have to go back to this part because it did catch me off. All right, so Sims says, no, no, my dad's not home. Okay, we're back to that again. But he doesn't even hesitate. Morgan Freeman doesn't even hesitate. He just cuts him off at the knees and says, what, are you going to feel sorry for yourself now? And I'm thinking, wow, dude, that's a little harsh. You know what I mean? So in your opinion, do you think Sims, based on your life experience, do you think Sims representing the Sims that you've seen is indeed doing that on purpose to try to, get some emotion going and trying to get some sympathy going, or do you think he was being legit and really sharing?
I think he was being legit, but it's still not a good enough reason to lack or not try your hardest, or I don't think it's a good enough reason. And I can't speak for that because I had a father, but I also have friends whose fathers weren't involved and they're doing just great, and it actually drove them to do more, and they had other figures in their life, I guess, fill the void, but they just didn't use that as the deciding factor to say, okay, this is a reason for me to be X, Y, and Z, And I don't think I'm pretty sure Mr. Morgan Freeman understands the ramifications of not having a father, but in that situation right there, I can't let this young man think that that's going to be an scapegoat for him going forward, because his dad's probably never going to be there to help him.
Gotcha. So this is what and I'm with you aboard all this. But as a father myself, as a guy who's a little older than 40, maybe older than 50, what I have seen, not just in uniform but out, is the continuing lack of taking personal responsibility for our failures or our mess-ups or whatever, and a good portion of those who surround us actually say to us, yeah, you're right. The reason you didn't get an A on that was this, this, and this. The reason you didn't get the job wasn't because you didn't prepare for the interview, it was this, 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 this. So what you guys are saying, even though this is within, recidivism and drug abuse, really applies a lot more to life as a whole. That is to say, regardless of the hand you're dealt, it's not going to benefit you to go over and over and over again, why don't I have a king and why don't I have a jack in my hand, right? I mean, if I'm hearing you right.
That's what I'm saying. You got to play you play that card.
Okay, but then I come back to you and I say, well, he's got a king and jack in his hand. In fact, he's got a great hand, and I've been dealt crap. Now what? I mean, you know what I mean? I'm angry about it.
Well, I think there's resources out there where he can go and see there's other kids that's dealing with the same hand that he's got.
Okay.
And they have succeeded.
Okay.
So that would give him motivation to see that the hand that he got, he can succeed, even though they got a better hand, and they might not exceed.
Okay. So as we got about 5 minutes, but so let's say you're in this situation. It's not a healthy situation. I think we both agree, or all of us agree on this. You're going to have to take some sort of action on your part to at least observe a different environment, different friends, a different. You're going to have to do. You're going to have to move out to some degree. It's chances of it coming to you are pretty minimal, if non-existent.
Yeah.
So what would be your best advice with regard to that? That is, moving out, just taking that first step. What would you, obviously it depends on your age and what your circumstances are, but for the most part,
you have to have a plan. So even with the outreach worker program we have, it's an action plan that we make going into this road that we're about to travel. It's an action plan where we touch on all those subcategories of recidivism, which can make a person recidivate. And you have to get each one of those categories in order in your life in order to be stable, from housing to environment like we just spoke of, But it is a hard fought fight. So that's why recidivism rates probably 70-80%. It's not, the rates of recidivism don't lie. They're high because it's not easy to change your environment overnight or to attain an educational level that can get you a job that can support a family if you're 40 years old and you have to work for $8, $9, but you have 2 or 3 mouths to feed. So it's hard to actually do it, but we start with an action plan, and it's based on all those factors in books that are around recidivism. And we feel like if we can get these factors in order, then we'll lower the recidivating rate.
Okay, and that makes sense. And I did notice what Morgan Freeman was talking to him. He says, well, how are you going to succeed, Sims? And he says, well, and he says, he had to have an action plan. I guess that told Morgan Freeman, well, he's been thinking about at least these are the things I'm going to have to do if I want to turn things around at school. You know what I mean? So maybe he was looking for that. So I'll leave you guys with this one. When Morgan Freeman's having this long dialogue with him, numerous times he calls out Sims, calls him a liar, basically says, I don't believe you. But at some point, Morgan Freeman does believe him, okay? What was Morgan Freeman looking for that he finally saw in Sims, do you think?
I think he's seen that Sims really wanted to help. He really needed a father figure. He really needed some guidance. And he's seen it in him, and he basically gave him a second chance. And basically like, I'm gonna be your guider. Gotcha. I'm gonna help you get where you need to go. But you're gonna have to walk by my steps, not yours.
Gotcha. That's a good, I like that. That's a good message. We got about 2 minutes left.
And one wanted to add on that, piggyback on that, the clip was more about Morgan Freeman than it was about Sims. Coming from our perspective as people who help in the community, It just shows you that you have to take up arms yourself and help out these younger people or the people who are going through things that you went through. Because when he said to him earlier, you trying to con artists. Meaning that I've been there, done that. So, you need to learn from people who are older than you. So I thought the clip was more about Morgan Freeman and his challenges in that field with helping with people who are in, and how you do it. And how that sigh of relief at the end, or that sigh of it's about to be a long road with this one.
Yeah, I made note of that sigh too. That says a lot, right? It does say, to me it says that he's invested in Sims, you know what I mean? And he's, like you said, he's looking at the journey ahead and he's like, man, this is gonna be a tough one. Okay, as we wrap it up, guys, do either one of you have anything to say to the audience with regard to if somebody is watching, they're intrigued by what they've heard, maybe they're in the throes of addiction, maybe they have a loved one that's in addiction, but is there something that you'd want to leave with them with regard?
I want to say something to some of the guys in my community. A lot of them went off to prison on their way home. I want to let them know when they come home, give me a call. I'm going to help them try to find employment, housing, try to do the best I can do to help them be productive citizens in society.
Outstanding. Thanks, man. Anything, Mark?
I just want to say it's a great opportunity in Washington County. The Sheriff's Office has given us, me personally, who has been, in trouble with the law, to redeem myself and show that I'm a productive member of society. So if anybody is in that same realm of looking for help and trying to better themselves and kind of shy away from the stigmas of being in trouble with the law at one point or another in your life, please reach out to us at the Sheriff's Office or reach out to me at gundym@ewashington.org.
There we go. And again, we'll put that up on the screen, but that's Washington County Sheriff's Department Outreach Program, and I will tell you the phone number as soon as I find it, 973-4974, and again, it should be up on your screen there. Thanks for joining us, and thank you both for being with us. By the way, behind Marv is a photograph of my boss, Sergeant Hickey, who is retiring as of next month. And I just want to say it's been a sincere pleasure working under you, sir, and all the best to you. All right, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on our next one. Oh, our next one's about traffic, by the way. Traffic questions, traffic issues, but ship the questions you might have to CTN Ann Arbor Shield. So we'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us.